Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you guys can see, we are in the shop today, and today is going to be actually a video on the Corvette. I know you guys have seen this go to the dyno, we went to a car show, and that's pretty much the last thing that we did on it. And you will have also seen the ZR1 caliper refinish video. So that's pretty much kind of like the last thing that we've done for this car. But we've actually got another dyno tune. Haven't made the appointment just yet, but we're gonna have another round of mods to take advantage of all the stuff that we're gonna do. So we got a couple rounds of mods that we're gonna do now. Eventually that will end up in another dyno result video, and we'll have that obviously published when we get to that point. But what we're doing today is focusing on cooling. If you guys remember, we have the C7 ZR1 style front bumper. So we've got these coolers in here. We've got the front open area, then we've got the oil cooler over on the driver's side. Well, today we're gonna figure out why we have a leaky oil cooler on the driver's side. I never did figure that out, and I really haven't driven the car much since then. So we bypassed it on the dyno, had to go up to PCM, install the block off plate that we installed initially, and then, you know, they were able to dyno it without issues. So what we're doing today is putting the improved racing oil cooler back on. Basically, that's their little adapter billet block. We'll put that back on the car. I'm also going to pull the cooler to see if there's any holes in it. Did we puncture one of the oil cooler lines? And the second part of this is actually going to be cooling for the supercharger. So you guys can see this is a C7 auxiliary cooler. It's multi-purpose. In some cars it's used as a transmission cooler, in some cars it's used as a extra radiator for the supercharger. So we're actually going to install this auxiliary cooler because I have the room. If you guys have a stock C6 ZR1 or a C6 Z06, you know, the stock bumper won't fit. You don't have the room. But if you guys can look, I'm not sure what you guys can see on the video, but I have all that room right there in front of the heat exchanger. That's the Edelbrock heat exchanger you're looking at. I have that cavity that has nothing in there. So I was looking online for the C7 auxiliary radiator because I'd seen part numbers and stuff floating around the internet, and that's how I ended up finding this. So this radiator is actually very cheap from General Motors. I want to say I got it for, it was either around $100 or it was like $140, somewhere in between. Like, it was really, really cheap. To put that in perspective, the heat exchanger from Edelbrock, that was like $700. So 150 bucks versus 700, not bad to increase the capacity of our system and have a secondary radiator for the supercharger. So basically how this is going to work is the upper coolant hose is going to keep flowing normal, and you know, that'll go through the Edelbrock heat exchanger, cool that coolant down. Then there's a radiator hose at the bottom, so the bottom right corner of the radiator, if you're looking at it from the front. That bottom right radiator, I will end up putting a 90, actually this hose right here, I'll put this 180-degree fitting on there and basically connect this hose to that hose, or I'll run it over here. I haven't really figured out which way we're going to do it. But basically that bottom port of the Edelbrock heat exchanger will tie into this port. The fluid will go through here and it'll end up coming out here, and we'll run this up to this radiator hose, and we'll run this, you know, alongside this hose and up. And that radiator hose will tie into what's already on the car. So all we're really doing is taking off a 90-degree fitting on the bottom of the heat exchanger on the driver's side, taking that off, putting a 180-degree fitting on there, going through the secondary cooler. Then we're going to run that hose from the outlet of this radiator into the outlet port, that hose that we already had for the old cooling system. So there, we might have one fitting we have to move, but like I said, this is going to literally go, you know, 180 degrees to the secondary cooler, through this cooler, and then we're just going to run this up to the existing hose that's already there. So this auxiliary radiator should be pretty simple to get mounted and get it plumbed in. So if you guys just heard a weird noise on the lift, well, that was the driver's side arm pissing out I think a new seal that I just replaced. It was the upper seal up here, and it was literally gushing from the arm. So that's awesome. So it looks like I get to replace yet another seal in this stupid Max Jacks. There's always something that want to prevent you from making progress. So I've pretty much determined that the seal that has gone bad is the top one. It's the one that's at the very top of the hydraulic ram. You got to take it all apart. It's actually kind of hard to get off. So that's great. But that's not going to prevent today's update. I want to do this video, so we're going to do it. We'll just not have to use the lift. Let me go grab my 2 floor jacks, do jack one side up, put a jack stand under the front, put another floor jack on the front, and just basically get the car up one corner at a time. All right, guys, you can see the Corvette is on jack stands. I got jack stand, I got a wheel chock behind the wheel. So you can see we got the wheel off, the front fender liner off, the brake duct, all that stuff's been pulled off. And here is our oil cooler that's leaking. You guys will see, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see that, but it is shiny. Looks like it might have been leaking on the left side, but I also saw oil on the right side of the cooler too. So I've gotten the first mount loose right here. I'm going to pull that off, and I'm going to have to go in. There's another hole up here. Let's see if we can see that. If you see way in the back, that hex bit, I need to pull that stainless steel bolt out as well. So I have looked the cooler over. I don't see any smoking guns of where this leak might be coming from on the cooler itself. I do have 2 things I want to point out. If you guys can see this kind of reflective area over here, I'm kind of pointing at with the flashlight right here. If you guys can see there is a oil trail from like 3/4 of the way up all the way down. And if you look at the bottom here, there is some grit, dirt, and then there's a pile of oil. There's a pile of oil there too. And if you look over here, this is the bottom plate. The oil is concentrated in that spot as well on this left side. All right, guys, I just pressure tested the oil cooler up to 90 PSI, and I couldn't find any obvious leaks. I used some Gorilla Tape on one of the ends. I just plugged off the other end with my finger. I just pressed this trigger and, put 90 PSI of air through here. I used some soapy water. I sprayed it along all the seams. I even sprayed it along the fins. I didn't see any bubbles. The only bubbles that I saw were where the Gorilla Tape kind of started to let loose. So a little bit in this corner, but that was it. I didn't see any major holes, any major leaks, anything like that. Then the other shocking thing is how much oil came out of the cooler when I was disconnecting lines. I was suspecting that there wasn't going to be any oil in here. Boy, was I wrong. As soon as I disconnected that first line, oil started dripping. I had to go get just drip pan. Then I popped off the second line, same thing. So this was holding oil when it was leaking. I thought because these lines have been disconnected from the block for a long time, I thought, all of that oil was already gone. It had all drained out. So I kind of have 2 suspicions. One, I've been seeing up to 80, 90 PSI of oil pressure in the car. That might be one contributing factor. So this tank may overpressurize at a certain PSI, and it might just bust loose the seal. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to put the cooler back in the car, but we're going to leave all of the cladding off. So all the splash lines, the liner, the bottom, all that. And then we'll get the car hot. Oh, obviously we'll hook up the improved racing block. We'll plug that back in. And I think we're just going to have to run it, let the car get up to operating temperature, and see if it starts puking again. Because, like I said, we only ran into that problem when it was in the dyno, and I think he was beating on it pretty good. So maybe it's oil temperature, maybe it's a PSI thing, I don't know. But I think that's the only way we're going to be able to determine where the leak is for the oil cooler. Alright guys, if you can see, I'm holding the cooler in place. If you guys can see from the front, you'll be able to see that the cooler will fit up in front of the Edelbrock heat exchanger without issue. And how we're going to mount this, you guys can see these holes right here, these 3 holes. We're going to use a simple piece of L channel aluminum. I'm going to have the L bracket come off here, go up, and then the flat part it's going to go forward, and we're going to mount the mounts facing upward, if that makes sense, with these V's going up just like that. Here are our brackets that we're obviously going to have to weld together. So the channel is 2x2 aluminum, and the plate I got, it was just 2" by, I think this was 3 or 4 feet long, something like that. I actually picked this up at Lowe's. The angle aluminum I picked up at a local metal supplier. And yeah, so how these mounts are going to work is they're going to end up, we're going to weld it like that and weld it something like that. So it's basically going to be 2 inches deep by 8 inches long, and the cooler will actually will mount to the very front of this, probably like right here. Then we'll have a vertical bolt going here that's going to tie into the lower radiator cross member. So all right guys, I have clamped the L bracket to the table. I really wish I had another one of these welding clamps, but unfortunately I kind of just have body working clamps. And the other piece, I've put a probably 2-pound piece of aluminum plate. This is over 1/2 inch thick. It's over a foot long. And yeah, so we're just gonna go ahead and weld this, and then go ahead weld the other one. Alright guys, so this is super hot, but we did get a nice bead going across there. I'm not going to flex it too much because I really don't want to have to re-weld this. So that's the top part. Like I said, we're going to have to grind that down. Let's go ahead and do the second one. Alright guys, you can see the L aluminum brackets that we made up. I have those bolted to the plastic bracket that holds this heat exchanger, and then you can see here we got the driver's side done as well. So basically what's going to happen is I'm going to put that up into here, attach it to here, attach it to the passenger side over there, and then this is going to fit up here. Alright guys, if you can see kind of behind the grill, we do have our horizontal flat heat exchanger in front of the other heat exchanger. Then you can see your 2 fittings up above there. So this thing laid in here perfect. I wasn't expecting it to go like that, but you can see this is the front of the heat exchanger. And here on the bottom, you guys can see we have our bolts going into the lower radiator support here on the passenger side and the driver's side, so you guys can see all that. You can see the bottom of our heat exchanger, and then you can see the bottom of our fittings. Now this fitting is a solid, oh, I can stick my whole finger in there, so that's a good 1/2 inch between this heat exchanger and the Edelbrock heat exchanger. The other side, I mean, I can fit my whole hand in between there, so no issue there. And yeah, so we got our mounts done. You guys can see our stainless steel hardware. We also have our lock nut bolts and nuts that we put on here, so this shouldn't go anywhere. And yeah, so that's pretty much going to be it from the bottom. Oh, and if you guys are concerned about airflow, guys, the bottom of the car is literally here. So we've probably got close to 2 inches between the bottom of our bottom tray and this heat exchanger. So we should have plenty of room for air to go through the grill, through this radiator, and up into the radiator stack. So as you just saw, we did get the heat exchanger mounted, and what we need to do next is actually connect that heat exchanger to the current heat exchanger, the Edelbrock one. And to do that, we've got this 180-degree fitting from HPS. This is a 3/4 inch hose. It's basically the same hose that we've used for the rest of the system. And how we're going to connect that is with these billet aluminum 3/4 inch end-to-end hose plugs. I think this is from ICT, actually. Yeah, so we got one from ICT. So if we end up having to tie into cut this line, make it a little bit longer, I've got one of those. And then I also have a second one to plug into the other end of the heat exchanger, because you need to have an in and an out. The input's going to use this 180-degree fitting. The output will use a 90-degree fitting on the car side. So let's go ahead and start drilling, basically. You can see this top line. I actually didn't need to cut it or anything. I just ran that. This is going to be the exit from the second heat exchanger. All I did was actually simply move it over to the other hole. And I'm not sure if you guys can see way down there. No, you're not going to be able to. But we did get the 180-degree hose installed. So let's go underneath and show you the update from down there. All right, so here's the update from the bottom. The top hose, what I'm pointing to with the flashlight, that is the exit line that was coming out of this heat exchanger. That is going to tie into the new heat exchanger. And this other hose that I'm now pointing to, that is the other end of the 180-degree hose. And that is going to go into the feed line for the heat exchangers that's back over there. All right, guys, a little bit of an update. This hose, the 180-degree hose, it happened to be a perfect length to fit this front fitting, so I took the silver adapter out. So we're gonna go directly from the Edelbrock heat exchanger into the 180 into the inlet, and then from the outlet, you guys will see I do have this, I think it was like 11.5 inches long between this fitting over here all the way over to the end. And then you also see that we are using the heat clamps from, I think it's Gator. It's what I ended up using on the top when we did the LS9 swap, the 2650 swap. So I decided, had a couple left over, let's just use them down here. So looking here at the bottom, we are fully done. We got the 10mm bolts, we got those back installed. You can see the front of the cooler right here. And looking up here, you guys can see the hose attachment. So we've got that fitting right there. That is the outlet. Behind that fitting and behind that hose, you guys can kind of see that. That's the inlet. And then this outlet, the long hose on top, that goes up and around and goes into the supercharger. All right, guys, I just finished bleeding the coolant system. You guys can see I have a couple bottles of coolant here. And this bled super easily. This has to be probably like the second easiest bleed job I've ever had to do. And so what I did was popped off the outlet line on the passenger side brick. This line goes directly down into the electric water pump down there. And I simply just primed it. I probably put, I don't know, 1 or 2 water bottle worth of coolant in there. And then the rest of the coolant that I recovered from when we drained the heat exchanger. And like always, I just used a really fine mesh paint filter. It's what I use to do base coat, clear coat, and all that. It's what I, those filters to clean out your paint. I just put one of those inside a funnel. Then I run that funnel into the coolant, and you guys will see that our tank right here is full. So with the additional roughly 1 foot of hose, maybe it's 15 inches of hose, but with that additional 15 inches of hose, as well as that another heat exchanger, I almost added another full gallon to the capacity of the cooling system. Now, I will admit, I probably lost a little bit of fluid when I popped off that lower radiator hose, but, I didn't see anything on the floor. There might have been a couple of dribbles. So, anywhere between half to 3/4 of a gallon of extra capacity, and that's never a bad thing. And I didn't have to add another tank. We just simply added another heat exchanger. So that's been going well. That system is done. As far as the oil cooler, guys, I'm just going to have to finish that up off screen. I've already gotten the improved racing block back on the hoses, but trying to get that attached to the block right now with everything attached underneath is being a total pain in the butt. I've spent over an hour trying to get the 2 screws, they're really small screws, lined up to go into the oil pan. It's the oil cooler passage. I already got the other one off. I tried to put this one on, but it's not lining up. And there's something that we're going to be doing in the future as the next video and the next mod that's literally directly in the way. So it makes no sense for me to fight this for another hour or a couple more hours trying to get those 2 bolts in when the thing that's in the way is going to be taken out of the car. So I'm saying screw it, and we're going to end the video here because, like I said, the thing that's in the way literally is coming out in the next video. So we're not going to do that. If you guys want to find out what we're putting in on the next video, the next upgrade, hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications. And if you guys want to help support the channel, check out all the links down below. I'll include part number for the C7 Auxiliary Radiator, the hose that we use, those billet ICT 3/4 inch male to male hose ends, the Vibrant hose, I think it's from Vibrant, the coolant hose we use for that, as well as those heat shrink clamps that we used. I'll include part numbers for all that down below. And also make sure you check out our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. And I'm going to remind you guys again, our used parts is up there. We've sold a lot of stuff, actually. We've got more stuff going on. Actually, the next video we'll have more parts going on there. So make sure you guys check that out, and that's going to be it. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.